The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of New Harmony, painting the colony world in shades of gold and amber. Children laughed as they chased each other through the crop rows while their parents worked the automated harvesters. It was a scene of perfect peace, the kind that had become common across human space as terraforming technology turned hostile worlds into gardens. Sarah Chen watched her 8-year-old daughter Maya race through the fields with her friends, their voices carrying on the gentle breeze. After 15 years of building this colony from nothing but rock and determination, moments like these made every hardship worthwhile. New Harmony was more than just another human settlement. It was home to 12,000 souls who had carved civilization from wilderness. The first sign of trouble came from the orbital monitoring station. Commander James Rodriguez noticed the anomalous readings on his sensor array at 0847 local time. Massive energy signatures were appearing at the edge of the system, far too large to be natural phenomena. "Sarah, we've got unknown contacts jumping into the system." Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication array. "Multiple ships, configuration unknown. They're not responding to our hails." Sarah's blood ran cold. New Harmony was in the outer rim, far from the main shipping lanes. Unscheduled visits were rare, and ships that didn't respond to communications were usually bad news.
"How many ships, James?"
17? No, 23. Contacts now. They're big, Sarah. Dreadnought class at minimum, and they're accelerating toward New Harmony. The colony had basic defensive systems, nothing that could stand against a fleet of that size. Sarah immediately activated the emergency protocols they had hoped never to use. "All civilians to the shelters. Transmit our surrender immediately on all frequencies and send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them we're under attack." But the approaching fleet had no intention of accepting surrender. The Zephyrian ships were marvels of biotechnology, their hulls grown rather than built, pulsing with organic energy conduits. Admiral Thakmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the primitive world below through compound eyes that could perceive across multiple spectrums. "Scans complete, Admiral," reported his tactical officer. "The planet shows signs of extensive agricultural development. Population approximately 12,000. No significant military installations detected." Thakmore's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power through efficient harvesting operations. They would take what they needed from this world, resources, genetic material, and slave labor, then move on to the next target. Begin the harvest protocol. "I want work crews assembled and transport ready within the hour." The Zephyrians had conducted hundreds of such operations across the galaxy. Lesser species either surrendered immediately or were quickly overwhelmed. These humans appeared to be no different from the countless others who had fallen before Zephyrian might. The bombardment began at noon. Precision plasma strikes eliminated the colony's communication array, power grid, and defensive emplacements within minutes. The humans had tried to surrender, broadcasting their submission on all frequencies, but Admiral Thakmore had his orders. The Empire needed workers for the mining operations in the Kepler Nebula, and humans were known to be remarkably adaptable to harsh environments. Landing craft descended through the smoke and flames, disgorging Zephyrian shock troops across New Harmony. The insectoid warriors moved with terrifying efficiency, herding civilians into collection points with bioelectric weapons that paralyzed rather than killed. The Empire had learned that damaged goods were less valuable. Sarah found herself pressed against the wall of the community center, Maya clutching her hand as Zephyrian warriors sorted the colonists into groups. The aliens were methodical, separating families, cataloging each person like inventory. Children went to one area, adults to another, the elderly to a third group that everyone tried not to think about too carefully. "Mama, where are they taking us?" Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, trying to project calm while her heart raced. "I don't know, sweetheart. But we're going to be brave, okay?" "Whatever happens, we're going to be brave." A Zephyrian overseer approached, its compound eyes scanning the humans with clinical detachment. When it spoke, a translation device rendered its clicking mandibles into cold, mechanical words. "You will be relocated to serve the Empire. Compliance will result in adequate treatment. Resistance will be corrected." James Rodriguez stood among a group of the colony's technical staff, his military training making him catalog every detail of their captors. The Zephyrians carried weapons he didn't recognize, moved with an unsettling grace, and displayed the casual efficiency of a species that had done this many times before. "How long do you think before Earth responds to our distress signal?" whispered Dr. Helen Park, the colony's chief medical officer. "Assuming it got through before they hit the comm array, minimum of 8 days for a message to reach the nearest patrol fleet." James replied quietly. 2 weeks for any significant response force to arrive. And how long do you think we have here? James watched as the Zephyrians loaded the first transport with colonists. The ship's biomechanical systems pulsed with an alien rhythm that made his skin crawl. I don't think we're staying here at all. The loading process took 6 hours. The Zephyrians worked with mechanical precision, treating the humans like cargo to be efficiently transported. Families were kept together when convenient, separated when not. The aliens showed no cruelty, but also no compassion. They were simply following procedures developed over countless similar operations. As the last transport lifted off from New Harmony's surface, Admiral Tackmore reviewed the operation's success. 12,000 humans captured with minimal losses, significant agricultural equipment seized, and the planet's rare minerals now available for extraction. It was precisely the kind of efficient harvest that had built the Empire's reputation. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving New Harmony a smoking ruin behind them. What Admiral Thackmore didn't know was that one person had escaped the roundup. Marcus Webb, a geological surveyor working in the Deep Canyon systems, had been conducting seismic surveys when the attack began. Hidden in a cave system 30 kilometers from the main settlement, he had watched helplessly as his home burned and his people were taken. Marcus had lost his wife to cancer 2 years earlier. His teenage son David and daughter-in-law Jennifer were among those loaded onto the Zephyrian transports. As he watched the alien fleet disappear into the stars, something fundamental changed inside him. The grief and helplessness crystallized into something harder, more focused. He activated his emergency beacon and began recording a message that would change the course of galactic history. This is Marcus Webb, New Harmony Colony. The settlement has been destroyed and all residents taken by an alien fleet. Species unknown, ships of biomechanical design. Fleet consisted of 23 vessels departed on heading 27 Mark IV. I'm uploading all sensor data now. He paused, looking up at the alien stars that had seemed so beautiful just hours ago. They took my boy. They took everyone. Someone needs to come for them. Someone needs to make this right. The message would reach Earth in 8 days. The response would take 2 weeks to arrive. But when it came, it would carry with it the full weight of human determination and the beginning of a pursuit that would span decades. The Zephyrian Empire had just made their greatest mistake. They had attacked humans, taken human children, and assumed that distance and time would protect them from consequences. They were about to learn why elder species throughout the galaxy had tried to warn them. Humans never stop coming. They never forget, and they never, ever let go. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the holographic display chamber of the UES Retribution, studying the three-dimensional reconstruction of the New Harmony attack. The data from Marcus Webb's emergency beacon had reached Earth Command 8 days ago, and the response had been swift and decisive. Humanity's largest battle fleet was now assembled at the edge of the destroyed colony system, ready to begin what military historians would later call the Great Pursuit. The Retribution was humanity's newest dreadnought, bristling with kinetic cannons and quantum torpedoes. Around her, 47 other warships hung in the void like silent monuments to human engineering. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support vessels, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled for a single operation. Admiral, we've completed our analysis of the alien ships, reported Commander Lisa Zhang, the fleet's intelligence officer. Biomechanical design. Organic hulls with what appear to be living weapon systems. The energy signatures suggest they use some form of biological fusion reactors. Vasquez nodded, her weathered features stern. At 55, she had served in 3 border conflicts and earned her reputation as a relentless tactician. The news of New Harmony had shaken Earth Command to its core. An entire human colony wiped out, 12,000 citizens taken. It was an act of war that demanded response. Any luck tracking their jump signatures? That's where it gets interesting, ma'am. Our quantum resonance trackers show they jumped toward the Andromeda vector, but the trail goes cold after approximately 50 light years. They're either using jump technology we don't understand, or they've found a way to mask their hyperspace signatures. Dr. Marcus Webb stood quietly at the back of the briefing room. Earth Command had offered him transport home, but he had refused. He wanted to be here when they found the aliens who had taken his son. The geological surveyor looked out of place among the military officers, but his presence served as a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. Marcus, you spent 3 years on New Harmony before the attack, Vasquez said, acknowledging him. Did you ever encounter any unusual alien activity? Ships that didn't match known species profiles? Marcus shook his head. New Harmony was quiet. The most exotic thing we saw were the occasional Centauri trading vessels. These attackers were completely unknown to us. Captain Sarah Chen entered the briefing room, her face pale but determined. She had been rescued from New Harmony's ruins along with 47 other survivors who had been missed in the initial sweep. Her daughter Maya was among those taken, a fact that had turned the former colonial administrator into a fierce advocate for pursuit. Captain Chen, Vasquez acknowledged.
Any new details from your debriefing sessions?
They were methodical, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. These weren't raiders or slavers acting on impulse.
This was a planned harvesting operation. They separated families, catalogued people by age and physical condition, and transported them like livestock. The room fell silent. Everyone present understood the implications. This wasn't a random attack, it was evidence of a systematic program of human exploitation. Admiral, interrupted Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. Priority message from the Centauri Council. They're requesting immediate contact. The holographic display shifted to show Ambassador Kiriel, the Centauri diplomatic representative. The tall, blue-skinned alien appeared agitated, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious distress. Admiral Vasquez, I must speak with you immediately about the attack on your colony. The species you describe, we know of them. Go ahead, Ambassador. They are called the Zephyrians, an empire of harvester species that has been expanding through this galactic sector for over 2 centuries. We have been warning younger species about them for decades, but few listen until it's too late. Yuki Tanaka, the fleet's xenobiologist, leaned forward. You've encountered them before? The Centauri lost 14 colonies to Zephyrian harvests before we developed adequate defenses. They are not conquerors in the traditional sense. They are farmers who view other species as crops to be cultivated and harvested. The implications sent a chill through the briefing room. Sarah Chen's hands clenched into fists as she processed what the ambassador was saying. Where do they take their captives? She demanded. The Zephyrians maintain vast labor camps throughout their territory. Workers are used for mining operations, construction projects, and biological experimentation. Most never return home. Admiral Vasquez felt a cold fury building in her chest. Ambassador, we need everything you know about Zephyrian territory, their technology, and their weaknesses. Admiral, with respect, the Zephyrian Empire spans nearly 1,000 star systems. They have fleets that dwarf your entire military. Previous attempts to rescue harvested populations have resulted in total loss of the rescue forces. Are you telling us to abandon our people?
I'm telling you that pursuing the Zephyrians is suicide.
No species has ever successfully mounted a large-scale rescue operation against them. The most you can hope for is to strengthen your defenses and prevent future attacks. The briefing room erupted in angry voices. Officers shouted over each other, some demanding immediate pursuit, others calling for careful planning. But Admiral Vasquez raised her hand, and silence fell. Ambassador, thank you for the information. Transmit everything you have about Zephyrian territory and capabilities. But understand this, we're not abandoning our people. Humans don't work that way. Admiral, please reconsider. The Zephyrians have destroyed entire civilizations who challenged them. Your 48 ships cannot stand against their might. Marcus Webb stepped forward, his quiet voice somehow carrying over the tension in the room.
Ambassador, you don't understand humans very well, do you?
The Centaur diplomat looked confused. I'm sorry? You see 48 ships and think about military odds. But we're not here to fight a war. We're here to bring our people home. And humans have a saying, we don't leave anyone behind. Admiral Vasquez smiled grimly. Marcus is right. This isn't about military conquest. This is about rescue, recovery, and making sure the Zephyrians understand that taking humans has consequences. She turned back to the holographic display, studying the star charts that showed the vast expanse of Zephyrian territory. Commander Zhang, I want our best intelligence teams working with the Centauri data. Find me patterns, staging areas, anything that tells us where they might take our people. Yes, ma'am. Captain Chen, you're our expert on the colony and the people who were taken. Work with Dr. Tanaka to develop profiles of our citizens. What skills they have? Where the Zephyrians might find them most useful? Understood, Admiral. Dr. Tanaka, I want a full analysis of Zephyrian biology. If we're going to fight them, I need to know how to hurt them. The xenobiologist nodded. I'll start with the Centauri data and see what we can determine. As the briefing broke up and officers scattered to their duties, Marcus Webb remained behind with Admiral Vasquez. The two stood in comfortable silence, watching the star charts rotate slowly in the holographic display. Marcus, you don't have to stay for this. Earth Command would transport you home, give you a full pension, help you start over somewhere safe. Admiral, they took my son, my daughter-in-law. Probably grandchildren I'll never get to meet if we don't succeed. He looked up at the stars. I've spent my whole life studying rocks and minerals, trying to understand what's under the surface of things. But this time, what's under the surface is simple. They hurt my family, and that's not something I can walk away from. Vasquez nodded. Then you're welcome to stay. But understand, this could take years. The Zephyrian Empire is vast, and finding 12,000 people in 1,000 star systems won't be easy. Admiral, I've got time. And from what I've learnt about humans in my 60 years, so do we. We're patient when we need to be, stubborn when it matters, and we don't give up on family. As if summoned by his words, Captain Chen appeared in the doorway. Admiral, we've got something. Doctor, Tanaka found references in the Centauri data to a primary staging facility called the Harvest Center. It's where they process new captures before distributing them throughout their territory. Vasquez felt her pulse quicken. Location? Roughly 200 light-years into Zephyrian space. It's heavily defended, but if our people are still together, that's where they'll be. How long to reach it? With our current jump drive technology? 6 weeks if we push the engines hard. Admiral Vasquez looked at the star chart, calculating distances and odds. 6 weeks to reach hostile territory, fighting unknown enemies with superior numbers and technology. Military doctrine said it was suicide. Human nature said it was necessary. Signal the fleet, plot a course for Zephyrian space. We're going to get our people back. As the order spread through the battle fleet, 48 human warships began their turn toward the unknown. Behind them lay Earth and safety. Ahead lay the vast expanse of the Zephyrian Empire and 12,000 human souls who needed rescue. The pursuit had begun. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler Nebula. Their ships silent as death among the swirling cosmic gases. 6 weeks of hard travel had brought them deep into Zephyrian territory, further from home than any human military force had ever ventured. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Retribution, studying the sensor displays that showed their target ahead. The Harvest Center. The Zephyrian facility was massive beyond imagination. Built around a captured asteroid, it sprawled across 50 kilometers of space like a metallic tumor. Biomechanical spires twisted upward from the surface, connected by organic conduits that pulsed with unknown energy. Docking bays large enough to hold dreadnoughts dotted the structure, and defensive platforms surrounded it in a protective sphere. My God, whispered Commander Zhang. The Centauri data didn't do it justice. There must be millions of people in that thing. Dr. Ched Pedo. Tanaka ran her hands over the biological scanner readings, her face pale. The life signs are incredible. I'm reading at least 50 different species signatures. This isn't just a processing center. It's a collection point for their entire harvesting operation. Marcus Webb stared at the massive structure, thinking of his son David somewhere within those twisting corridors. The scale was overwhelming, but the old geologist had learned something important during his years digging through planetary crusts. The biggest structures often had the simplest weaknesses. Admiral, look at the power distribution, he said quietly, pointing to the scanner displays. See how all those bioconduits feed back to central processing cores? It's like a nervous system. Vasquez studied the readouts. You're thinking nerve centers? Cut the right connections and paralyze the whole system? Exactly. In geology, we call it structural analysis. Find the load-bearing elements, remove them, and even the biggest mountain comes down. Captain Chen joined them at the tactical display. If we can disable their defensive systems, we might have a chance to get inside. But we'll need a distraction, something to draw their fleet away from the facility. How many ships are we looking at? Vasquez asked. Long-range scans show approximately 80 vessels of various classes, Zhang reported. Twice our numbers, and that's just what we can see. There are probably more in the interior docks. The odds were overwhelming, but Admiral Vasquez had expected that. The human fleet wasn't here to win a traditional battle. They were here to extract their people and get out. Sometimes the most desperate plans were the only ones that worked. All right, people, here's what we're going to do. The fleet splits into 3 groups. Group Alpha, destroyers, and frigates will create a diversion on the far side of the facility. Make noise, look threatening, draw their main fleet away from the extraction point. What about Group Beta? Asked Captain Rodriguez from the UES Vengeance. Group Beta consists of our Marines and boarding specialists. You'll use the distraction to penetrate the facility and locate our people. Dr. Tanaka's biological scanners should help you find human life signs quickly. And Group Gamma? The heavy ships stay here to cover the extraction. When Beta finds our people, we'll need to punch a hole through whatever defenses remain and get everyone out fast. It was a simple plan with 1,000 ways to fail, but sometimes simplicity was the only way to handle impossible odds. The human fleet began splitting into its assigned groups, 48 ships, preparing for the most desperate rescue mission in human history. Meanwhile, inside the Harvest Center, the humans from New Harmony were learning the true horror of Zephyrian efficiency. The processing facility was a maze of corridors and chambers, each designed for maximum productivity. Captured beings from dozens of species worked side by side, sorted by physical capabilities rather than origin. Sarah Chen found herself in a manufacturing section, operating biomechanical assemblers that created components for Zephyrian ships. The work was exhausting, but it kept her alive and relatively safe. More importantly, it gave her opportunities to move through the facility and search for Maya. The Zephyrians managed their workforce through a combination of bioelectric control collars and systematic separation. Families were split up to prevent organized resistance, and workers were rotated between sections to eliminate familiarity. It was a system perfected over centuries of practice. But the Zephyrians had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated human adaptability. Within days of their arrival, the New Harmony survivors had begun developing a covert communication network. Using hand signals disguised as work motions, coded messages in the scratches they made on their workstations, and whispered conversations during meal periods, they slowly rebuilt contact with each other. David Webb, Marcus's son, had emerged as one of the network's coordinators. His background in colonial communication systems helped him understand the facility's information flows, and his natural leadership abilities made him a focal point for resistance planning.
"We can't fight them directly," he whispered to Jennifer, his wife, during a brief meal break. "But we can gather intelligence, map the facility, and be ready when help comes."
You really think someone's coming for us?
David looked around at the massive alien structure surrounding them.
My father's still out there. I know him. He'll find a way to get word to Earth. And when he does, someone will come. Humans don't abandon their own. His confidence was infectious, spreading through the survivor network like wildfire. Even in the darkest moments, surrounded by alien technology and facing an uncertain future, the New Harmony colonists held on to hope. That hope was about to be tested. The human attack began at 0600 ship time. Group Alpha screamed in from the nebula's edge, weapons blazing and sensors active. The destroyers USS Pike and USS Shark led the charge, their quantum torpedoes lighting up the void like miniature suns. Behind them, 8 frigates spread into attack formation, targeting the Harvest Center's outer defensive platforms. The Zephyrian response was swift and overwhelming. Bioships erupted from hidden docking bays, their organic hulls pulsing with weapon charges. The aliens had been caught off guard, but they had dealt with rescue attempts before. Their tactics were simple: destroy the attackers quickly and return to normal operations. But these attackers were human, and they had their own ideas about normal operations. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the USS Pike, watched the Zephyrian fleet moving to intercept her force. 60 ships against her 8. Impossible odds under normal circumstances. But normal circumstances didn't apply when you were fighting to save your own people. All ships, engage evasive pattern Delta. Make them work for every shot. Our job isn't to win, it's to keep them busy. The human destroyers scattered like leaves in a hurricane, their smaller size and superior maneuvering giving them temporary advantages. Quantum torpedoes struck bioship hulls, tearing gaps in organic armor, while kinetic cannons punched through alien defensive screens. But the Zephyrians had numbers, and their weapons were devastating. The frigate USS Ranger died in a burst of bioplasma, her hull cracking open like an egg. The USS Storm followed minutes later, overwhelmed by focusing fire from 3 Zephyrian cruisers. "Pike, this is Admiral Vasquez. Status report. We're taking heavy losses, Admiral, but we're keeping them busy. Count 60-plus enemy vessels moving away from the facility." "Understood. Group Beta, you have your window. Move now." While the battle raged on the far side of the Harvest Center, 12 human ships slipped through the nebula's concealing gases. These were the specialists, marine transport sporting vessels and rapid assault craft designed for close-quarters fighting. Colonel Marcus Thorne commanded the marine assault, leading 3,000 of humanity's finest soldiers into the alien facility. The plan was simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution: penetrate the Harvest Center, locate the human prisoners, and extract them before the Zephyrian fleet could return. "Breaching charges set," reported Sergeant Kim as her team prepared to cut through the facility's outer hull. "Reading atmosphere on the other side, gravity approximately 0.8 standard." "Biological hazards?" asked Thorne. "Unknown, sir. The air's got a lot of organic compounds, but nothing immediately toxic to humans. Good enough. Blow it. The hull breach opened like a flower of fire, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Human Marines poured through the gap, their powered armor systems adapting to the alien environment. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing corridors and advancing toward the facility's interior. The Zephyrians had guards, but they were designed for crowd control rather than military resistance. Bioelectric weapons that could paralyze unarmed workers were less effective against armored Marines, and the aliens' defensive positions were optimized for preventing prisoner escapes rather than repelling invasion. Contact, 20 meters ahead. Called Lieutenant Torres. Multiple hostiles, non-human configuration. The firefight was brief but intense. Human kinetic weapons proved devastatingly effective against biomechanical armor, while Zephyrian plasma weapons struggled to penetrate Marine battlesuits. Within minutes, the corridor was secure. Colonel, this is Dr. Tanaka aboard the Hippocrates. I'm reading massive human life signs throughout the facility. Your people are scattered across at least 15 different sections. Thorne grimaced. They had feared this. The Zephyrians had spread their prisoners throughout the massive structure to prevent exactly this kind of rescue. All units split into company-sized groups. We'll have to hit multiple sections simultaneously. Remember, our people have been here for weeks. They may not immediately trust strangers in armor. The Marines spread through the Harvest Center like avenging angels, their weapons clearing corridors while their sensors searched for human prisoners. What they found defied their worst expectations. The facility was vast beyond comprehension, its biomechanical corridors stretching for kilometers through the asteroid's core. Thousands of workers from dozens of species labored in massive chambers, producing everything from ship components to biological weapons. The scale of the operation was staggering. This was just one facility among hundreds scattered throughout Zephyrian space. Sergeant Williams found the first group of New Harmony survivors in Manufacturing Section Delta 7. 34 humans operating assembly lines under Zephyrian supervision, their movements controlled by bioelectric collars that delivered painful shocks for any deviation from assigned tasks. Federal Marines! Williams called out, his armor's speakers amplifying his voice. We're here to get you out. The response was immediate chaos. Some prisoners rushed toward the Marines, tears streaming down their faces. Others cowered, afraid that this was some new form of Zephyrian testing. The alien supervisors activated emergency protocols, flooding the section with paralyzing gas that affected unprotected humans, but rolled harmlessly off Marine armor. Gas masks now, Williams shouted, throwing emergency breathing apparatus to the nearest prisoners. We're getting you out of here. Similar scenes played out throughout the facility as Marine companies located scattered groups of human prisoners. The rescue was chaotic, desperate, and heartbreaking, but it was working. Colonel Thorne reached Manufacturing Section Gamma 3 and found Sarah Chen operating a biomechanical assembler. She looked up as the armored figure approached, her eyes wide with disbelief. Sarah Chen? That's me. How do you know my name? Admiral Vasquez sends her regards. We're here to bring you home. Sarah's composure finally broke. Weeks of holding herself together, of staying strong for the other prisoners, of believing that somehow rescue would come, it all came crashing down as the reality hit her. My daughter, she gasped. Maya. She's in the juvenile section, Habitat Ring C. Please, we'll find her, Thorne promised. That's what we do. But even as the rescue operation continued, new problems were emerging. The facility's biomechanical systems were responding to the intrusion, sealing corridors and releasing defensive organisms. Worse, long-range sensors detected the return of the Zephyrian fleet. Group Alpha's distraction couldn't last forever. All units expedite extraction, Thorne commanded. We've got company coming, and this place is about to become very unfriendly. The race was on. 12,000 human prisoners scattered throughout a massive alien facility, with only minutes before overwhelming enemy forces arrived. It was the kind of impossible situation that human military doctrine said couldn't be solved. But human soldiers had never much cared about doctrine when lives were at stake. The Harvest Center shuddered as the facility's biomechanical systems activated full defensive protocols. Living walls began sealing corridors while organic sensor networks tracked the human Marines through kilometers of alien architecture. The race to extract 12,000 prisoners had become a desperate fight against time, technology, and an awakening nightmare of biological warfare. Colonel Thorne pressed through Habitat Ring C, his armor's sensors scanning for human life signs among the thousands of alien workers. The juvenile section was deep within the facility's core, protected by multiple security layers that were now all activating simultaneously. "Sir, we've got movement," reported Sergeant Martinez. "Something big coming through the ventilation systems." The something turned out to be a Zephyrian security organism, a writhing mass of tentacles and bioelectric weaponry that erupted from a wall vent like living lightning. The creature moved with terrifying speed, its organic weapons crackling as it targeted the nearest Marine. "Concentrated fire!" Thorn ordered. Kinetic rounds tore through the creature's biomechanical structure, green fluid spraying across the corridor walls. But even as it died, the organism released spores that began eating through the Marine's armor sealant systems. "Biological hazard detected," announced the armor's AI. "Recommend immediate decontamination protocols." "Negative," Thorn replied. "We don't have time. All units, push through. Accept calculated risks." Meanwhile, in Manufacturing Section Alpha 9, David Webb was leading a group of New Harmony survivors toward an emergency evacuation point. The young man had spent weeks mapping the facility's layout, and now that knowledge was saving lives. "This way," he called to the 43 people following him. The Marine said to reach Docking Bay 7. "It's through the processing center." The bioelectric collars that controlled the workforce had been designed to prevent exactly this kind of movement, but the facility's emergency protocols had overridden normal containment procedures. Blast doors were sealing, atmosphere was being adjusted, and the alien supervisors were more concerned with protecting critical systems than managing individual prisoners. Jennifer Webb stayed close to her husband, helping an elderly Centauri engineer who had been captured months earlier. The alien was weak from prolonged captivity, but his knowledge of Zephyrian technology had proven invaluable. "The bio-neural networks," the Centauri wheezed as they moved. "If your people can damage the central processing nodes, it will cascade through the entire facility. The Zephyrians designed everything as one organism." David filed away the information. If they survived this, someone needed to know how to hurt these monsters. Back in Habitat Ring C, Colonel Thorne found what he was looking for. The juvenile section was a maze of smaller chambers, each designed to house young prisoners from various species. The Zephyrians had learned that separating children from adults prevented formation of resistance networks, but it also concentrated them in a single area. "Maya Chen!" Thorne called out as his team moved through the chambers. "Maya Chen! Are you here?" A small voice answered from the third chamber. "I'm here." Mama said to be brave. Thorne's heart clenched as he saw the 8-year-old girl huddled with 17 other human children. They ranged in age from toddlers to teenagers, all wearing the simple grey uniforms of Zephyrian prisoners. Their faces showed the strain of weeks in captivity, but their eyes held the resilience that made humanity special. "Maya, I'm Colonel Thorne. Your mother sent me to bring you home." The little girl's face lit up with hope. "Mama's here? In this place? She's safe, and we're getting everyone out. But I need you and the other children to be very brave for just a little longer. Can you do that?" The children nodded with the solemn determination that only the young could manage in impossible circumstances. Thorne activated his comm system and called for immediate extraction support. "This is Thorne. I have 18 human juveniles at Habitat Ring C, Section 4. Priority 1 extraction requested." "Roger, Colonel. Raven Squad is inbound with transport." But the facility wasn't giving up its prisoners easily. As Thorne's team prepared to move the children, new biomechanical creatures emerged from the walls, smaller than the security organisms, but faster and more numerous. They swarmed toward the humans with chittering sounds that spoke of alien hunger. "Protective circle," Thorne ordered. "Keep the kids in the center." The Marines formed a defensive perimeter around the children, their weapons creating a wall of kinetic death. But the creatures kept coming, pouring from vents and access hatches like a living tide. "Colonel!" Maya's voice cut through the chaos. "The floor panels. The Zephyrians always avoid the marked floor panels." Thorne looked down and saw what the observant child meant. Certain floor sections bore bioluminescent markings that the alien supervisors had always stepped around. He made a command decision based on an 8-year-old's observation. "Everyone onto the marked panels. Move." The gamble paid off. As soon as the humans stepped onto the marked areas, the attacking creatures pulled back, chittering in what might have been frustration. The biomechanical organisms were programmed not to damage critical facility infrastructure, and the marked panels were apparently part of that protected zone. "Good eye, Maya," Thorne said with genuine admiration. "You just saved all our lives." The little girl smiled, and for a moment, the nightmare around them seemed less overwhelming. Meanwhile, Admiral Vasquez was fighting her own desperate battle. The Zephyrian fleet was returning to the Harvest Center, and Group Alpha's distraction force was down to 3 ships. The destroyers Pike and Shark were still fighting, but they were running on empty magazines and damaged systems. "Admiral," reported Captain Santos from the Pike, her voice strained with exhaustion, "we can't hold them much longer. Hull integrity is at 30%, and we're down to emergency power."
Understood, Maria.
"Break off and return to the rally point. You've given us everything we could ask for." "What about the extraction?" Vasquez studied the tactical display. Marine teams were scattered throughout the facility, still gathering prisoners. The evacuation was proceeding, but slowly. Too slowly. "We're going in," she decided. All Group Gamma ships advanced to the facility. Maximum firepower on their defensive positions. We're going to punch a hole and hold it open. The heavy cruisers and battleships of Group Gamma emerged from the nebula like avenging angels, their weapons blazing. The UES Retribution led the charge, her quantum torpedoes carving through the facility's outer defensive ring. Behind her, the cruisers Washington and Moscow added their firepower to the assault. The Zephyrian defenders fought back with bioplasma weapons and organic missiles that tracked like living creatures. The cruiser Beijing took a direct hit that tore through her port armor, venting atmosphere and debris. But the human ships pressed on, their crews fighting with the desperate fury of people trying to save their own. "Breaching the outer ring," reported Commander Jane. "Docking Bay 7 is clear for evacuation operations. Signal all extraction teams. We have an exit point." Throughout the facility, the message spread through every human comm system. "Rally at Docking Bay 7. Extraction imminent. Move now." The convergence was chaotic but magnificent. Human Marines fought running battles through biomechanical corridors while leading streams of liberated prisoners. Survivors from New Harmony mixed with captives from dozens of other species, all united by the simple desire to escape their nightmare. Sarah Chen reached the docking bay just as the first transport ships were arriving. The sight of human vessels cutting through alien architecture was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. But her joy was tempered by worry. Maya was still somewhere in the facility. "Colonel Thorne, this is Chen. Do you have my daughter?" "Affirmative. Inbound with 18 juveniles. ETA 3 minutes." Those 3 minutes felt like hours. The docking bay was a scene of controlled chaos as Marines organized evacuation lines and medical teams triaged the most seriously injured prisoners. Dr. Park from New Harmony had been found in the medical section and was already treating malnutrition and trauma symptoms. Then Thorne's team arrived, and Sarah saw her daughter for the first time in weeks. "Mama!" Maya ran across the docking bay, throwing herself into her mother's arms with the desperate joy of a child who had never stopped believing in rescue. Sarah held her daughter tight, tears streaming down her face. Around them, similar reunions were playing out as families found each other again. The human spirit, tested by captivity and torture, proved stronger than alien technology. But the extraction was far from over. Long-range sensors showed the Zephyrian fleet was almost back in range, and the facility's defensive systems were adapting to human tactics. Worse, the biomechanical organisms were massing for a coordinated counterattack. "All evacuation vessels, expedite loading," Admiral Vasquez ordered. "We've got minutes, not hours." Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of a marine transport, watching the massive alien facility through the viewports. His son was down there somewhere, along with thousands of other human souls who deserved rescue. But the math was inexorable. They couldn't save everyone in the time they had left. That's when David Webb's voice crackled over the comm system. "This is David Webb to any human command authority. I have critical intelligence on facility vulnerabilities." Marcus felt his heart stop. His son was alive, somewhere in that nightmare. "David, this is your father. Go ahead." "Dad?" The young man's voice cracked with emotion. "God, Dad, I hoped you'd made it out." "I did, son. Now tell me how to help you." "The facility's bio-neural networks. They all connect to central processing cores in the main hub. If you can take out those cores, the whole system will collapse. Emergency protocols will open all containment areas and shut down the defensive organisms." Admiral Vasquez listened to the exchange with growing understanding. A surgical strike against the facility's nerve centers could potentially free every prisoner simultaneously. But it would require staying in the fight longer, taking greater risks. "Mr. Webb," she said, "are you certain about this intelligence?" "Yes, ma'am. I've had weeks to study this place. Hit the central cores and you'll paralyze everything." Vasquez looked at the tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet would be in range in 8 minutes. Group Gamma was already taking heavy fire from the facility's defenses. Every second they stayed increased the risk of losing ships and crews, but 12,000 human lives hung in the balance. All ships, new mission parameters. Target the facility's central hub. Maximum firepower, surgical precision. We're going to cut the head off this snake. The human fleet turned toward the Harvest Center's core like a pack of wolves sensing wounded prey. They had come to rescue their people, but they were about to do something more. They were going to hurt the monsters who had dared to cage human children. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn that some species didn't just bite back. They bit back so hard that the predator became the prey. The assault on the Harvest Center's central core began with a coordinated barrage that lit up space like a new star. Every human ship in Group Gamma focused their fire on the bio-neural processing centers, quantum torpedoes and kinetic cannons striking with surgical precision. The facility's organic armor buckled and tore, green biofluid venting into the void as critical systems began cascading failures. Admiral Vasquez watched the tactical display as David Webb's intelligence proved devastatingly accurate. Each destroyed processing node sent shockwaves through the facility's biomechanical nervous system, causing defensive organisms to convulse and die while containment fields flickered and failed. "Admiral, massive power fluctuations throughout the facility," reported Commander Jang. "Their entire neural network is collapsing. Signal all extraction teams. Move now. Every containment area should be opening." Inside the Harvest Center, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Bioelectric locks disengaged, corridor seals retracted, and the organic creatures that had been hunting human marines suddenly stopped moving, their connection to the facility's controlling intelligence severed. David Webb led his group through corridors that had been sealed minutes before, gathering other prisoners as the facility's grip on its workforce dissolved. The Zephyrians had designed their harvesting operation as a single organism, but that same integration made it vulnerable to systemic collapse. "Jennifer, take the others to Docking Bay 7, he called to his wife. "I'm going back for stragglers." "David, no. The whole place is falling apart. That's exactly why people will be trapped. I can't leave anyone behind." It was a fundamentally human decision, risking safety to help strangers, and it exemplified why the Zephyrians had so thoroughly underestimated their latest prey. They understood harvesting and exploitation, but they had never encountered a species that consistently chose sacrifice over self-preservation. Meanwhile, Colonel Thorne was discovering the true scope of the facility. With the neural controls down, sections that had been hidden were now accessible. Behind biometric locks and neural barriers, the Marines found chambers full of prisoners from species they had never seen before. "My God," whispered Sergeant Kim as they entered Storage Bay Omega. "How long have these people been here?" The chamber held hundreds of beings in biomechanical stasis pods, their life signs barely detectable. Some appeared to be from civilizations that predated human spaceflight by millennia. The Zephyrians hadn't just been harvesting workers, they had been collecting entire species for purposes unknown. "Colonel, we can't leave them," said Dr. Tanaka, her voice breaking as she studied the alien life signs. "Some of these species may be extinct everywhere else." Thorne looked at the tactical display on his armor. The Zephyrian fleet was 3 minutes out, his extraction window was closing, and he had a choice between saving known human lives and unknown alien ones. It wasn't really a choice at all. All units were taking everyone. Prep the stasis pods for transport. If they're alive, we're bringing them home. The decision would have far-reaching consequences that nobody could foresee. Among the rescued prisoners were representatives of ancient civilizations thought lost, keepers of technologies that would revolutionize human science, and most importantly, witnesses to the full scope of Zephyrian crimes against galactic civilization. Admiral Vasquez felt the bridge shake as Zephyrian bioplasma struck the Retribution shields. The enemy fleet had arrived, and they were not happy to find their harvest facility under assault. 80 alien ships spread into attack formation, their organic hulls pulsing with weapons-charging cycles. "Admiral," called Captain Chen from her position at the tactical station, "all evacuation ships report full capacity. We've rescued approximately 11,800 prisoners. What about the remaining 200? Colonel Thorne reports they're spread throughout the facility. Full extraction will take another 20 minutes. Vasquez looked at the enemy formation bearing down on her fleet. 20 minutes was an eternity in combat, especially against superior numbers. But the math was simple. Every human life was worth fighting for. Signal the fleet. We hold this position. Maximum defensive formation. Make every shot count. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations. 48 human ships against 80 Zephyrian vessels, fighting to protect evacuation operations in the heart of enemy space. The humans had no hope of victory in traditional terms. But they weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to save lives. The UES Moscow died first, overwhelmed by focused fire from 3 Zephyrian biocruisers. Her hull cracked open like a broken egg, but her crew fought until the last second, her guns still firing as atmosphere vented through massive breaches. The destroyer squadron, led by Captain Santos, tried to break through the enemy formation, hoping to draw fire away from the evacuation ships. The tactic worked, but at terrible cost. The USS Shark vanished in a burst of bioplasma that turned her hull to molten metal. The USS Pike lasted longer, her captain fighting with desperate skill until overwhelming numbers finally brought her down.
"Pike is gone," reported the sensor operator, his voice thick with grief. No survivors detected. Admiral Vasquez felt each loss like a physical blow, but she forced herself to focus on the mission.
Good people were dying to save other good people. It was the kind of mathematics that defined humanity at its best and worst. All ships, maintain formation. Give the extraction teams every second we can. Inside the facility, David Webb was living up to his family's reputation for stubborn determination. He had found a group of prisoners from a species called the Valdari, ancient enemies of the Zephyrians who had been in captivity for decades. They were weak, barely able to walk, but they carried information that could change the course of the war. The Empire's supply lines, wheezed their leader, a being that looked like crystallized starlight. We know their routes, their staging areas. Every harvest facility in this sector. David helped the aliens toward the evacuation point, his mind racing. This wasn't just about rescuing New Harmony's survivors anymore. This was about striking back at the entire Zephyrian system. How many facilities like this one? Hundreds, the Valdari replied, spread across 1,000 systems. But they all report to regional command centers. Destroy those, and the harvest operations collapse. The information was priceless, but only if they survived to use it.
The facility was coming apart around them, biomechanical systems failing as the neural network's collapse cascaded through every connected system. Colonel Thorne made the hardest decision of his career as he watched the facility's structural integrity readings.
The building was going to collapse whether they were ready or not, and he still had Marines scattered throughout the complex. All units, emergency extraction. Abandon search and rescue. Get to the transport ships now. Some of his people wouldn't make it. Some prisoners would be left behind.
But the alternative was losing everyone to a catastrophic structural failure. Marcus Webb stood in the transport ship's cargo bay, watching David's locator beacon on the tactical display. His son was moving through the facility's collapsing sections, still trying to save people, even as the structure came apart around him.
"Come on, boy," he whispered.
"Don't be a hero, just come home." But heroism was apparently a family trait.
David Webb reached the final evacuation point with 17 alien prisoners just as the last transport was preparing to depart. The dock was shaking itself apart, biomechanical supports failing as the facility's death throes began. "Go!" David shouted, pushing the aliens toward the ship's ramp. "Get them aboard!" The transport's captain, Commander Sarah Kim, watched the young man with growing admiration and horror. She could see what he couldn't. The dock support structure was about to give way, and anyone still on it would be crushed. "Webb, get on the ship."
"That's an order."
17 more souls saved, David replied calmly, making sure the last alien was safely aboard.
"That's what matters."
He almost made it. The dock began collapsing just as David reached the ship's ramp, biomechanical supports groaning under impossible stress. Commander Kim made a split-second decision, engaging the transport's emergency boost while the ramp was still extended. The ship lurched forward just as the dock collapsed, David Webb diving through the closing hatch as tons of alien architecture crashed down behind him. He hit the deck hard, gasping for breath, but alive.
"Son of a bitch," Kim breathed. "Remind me never to play poker with your family." The evacuation was complete, but the battle was far from over.
Admiral Vasquez watched her fleet's defensive formation buckle under relentless Zephyrian assault. The heavy cruiser Washington was listing badly, her port armor completely gone. The Moscow was already dead, and 2 more destroyers were reporting critical damage. But they had bought the time they needed. 11,847 beings were now safely aboard human ships, including representatives of civilizations that carried the keys to striking back at the Zephyrian Empire. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump," Vasquez ordered.
"Set course for the rally point."
"Admiral," interrupted the sensor operator. "The facility's about to undergo catastrophic collapse. The explosion will take out everything within a 50-kilometer radius."
Vasquez looked at the tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet was close enough to be caught in the blast, but so were 3 of her damaged ships that couldn't charge their jump drives fast enough. It was another impossible choice in a mission full of them. Save the 3 ships and lose the chance to escape with their rescued prisoners, or abandon good people to save the greater mission. But Admiral Elena Vasquez hadn't become humanity's most respected fleet commander by accepting impossible choices. Washington, Beijing, and Armstrong, slave your navigation systems to the Retribution. We're taking you home. The 3 damaged ships locked their systems to the flagship's navigation computers just as the Harvest Center began its final collapse. The massive facility's biomechanical structure couldn't handle the systemic failures cascading through its networks. Critical supports failed, power conduits ruptured, and the entire asteroid-sized complex started tearing itself apart. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace in a blaze of exotic energy, carrying their rescued prisoners towards safety. Behind them, the Harvest Center exploded in a burst of light visible across half the solar system. The Zephyrian fleet, caught by surprise and too close to escape, was consumed in the blast that destroyed their primary processing facility and decades of accumulated resources. But Admiral Tackmore was not aboard the destroyed fleet. He had been commanding operations from a regional headquarters 3 systems away, and when news of the disaster reached him, his reaction was swift and terrible. The humans had not just rescued their people, they had struck at the heart of the Empire's harvesting operation and cost the Zephyrians more resources than any single battle in their history. It was an insult that demanded response. "Assemble the hunting fleets," Tackmore commanded. "Find these humans. Find their homeworld. Show the galaxy what happens to species that challenge the Empire." But the Zephyrians had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human nature. They saw the rescue as an attack to be punished. Humans saw it as proof that their people could be saved, no matter how impossible the odds. 3 months later, Admiral Vasquez stood before the United Earth Defense Council, presenting intelligence gathered from the rescued prisoners. The holographic display showed the full scope of the Zephyrian Empire. Thousands of systems, hundreds of facilities, millions of enslaved beings from across the galaxy. "The rescued Valdari have provided us with complete intelligence on Zephyrian operations," she reported. "Supply routes, command structures, and most importantly, the locations of every major facility in this galactic sector." General Morrison, chairman of the Defense Council, studied the data with growing amazement. "Admiral, this intelligence represents the greatest strategic windfall in human military history. We could cripple their entire operation."
That's the idea, sir. But the resources required.
We're talking about a campaign that could last decades. Hundreds of ships, thousands of personnel, costs that would bankrupt the colonial economy. Vasquez looked around the council chamber at the faces of Earth's military leadership. Some showed excitement, others concern, but all reflected the weight of the decision they faced. "General, with respect, we've already paid the real cost. Maria Santos and her crew on the pike. The Moscow's 800 souls. All the people who died to prove that humans don't abandon their own." She activated a new section of the display, showing intelligence estimates of enslaved human populations throughout Zephyrian space. Current projections suggest approximately 50,000 humans in Zephyrian captivity, taken from raids over the past 2 decades that we never even knew about. Colonies too small or too remote to call for help. Survey teams that just disappeared. Entire populations that fell off our sensors and were written off as lost to navigation accidents. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The attack on New Harmony hadn't been an isolated incident. It was part of a systematic campaign against human space that had been going on for years. Furthermore, Vasquez continued, the rescued aliens represent civilizations with technologies we can barely comprehend. The Valdari alone have offered to share hyperspace jump coordinates that would cut our travel times by 70%. Other species have knowledge of weapons, defensive systems, and industrial processes that could revolutionize human technology. General Morrison leaned back in his chair, processing the information. The choice was becoming clear. They could either accept the Zephyrian raids as a cost of expansion, or they could commit to a campaign that would either free thousands of human prisoners or destroy the defense forces in the attempt. "Admiral, if we authorize this campaign, what would you call it?" Vasquez smiled grimly. "Operation Persistence, sir, because that's what humans do best. We don't give up, we don't forget, and we never stop coming for our own." Marcus Webb, sitting in the gallery as a special advisor, thought about his son David, now helping to establish communication protocols with the rescued alien civilizations. The boy had grown up a lot during his time in Zephyrian captivity, but he had also proven something important about human character.
Some species hunted until they were tired, others until they were satisfied. But humans hunted until justice was served, no matter how long it took or how far they had to go. The Zephyrian Empire had ignored the warnings. They had taken human children, enslaved human families, and assumed that distance and power would protect them from consequences. They were about to learn the truth that elder species had tried to tell them. When you hurt humans, they don't just come for you. They keep coming until the debt is paid in full. The Great Pursuit was about to become something much larger and more terrible. It was about to become the Great Reckoning, and the galaxy would never be the same.